All right. Good evening, grade eights. I hope that you guys are all doing well and that your Mondays haven't been too harsh on you um, so far. Guys, we are back now for week 15 of tutoring. We've gotten a lot done this year, but we still have quite a long way to go. Nonetheless, I hope that you guys have been feeling a little bit more confident with your work as you've progressed through grade, that you are enjoying it so far. You've still got a ways to go, guys, but it's no surprise that we are going to be heading into exam season fairly shortly. For many schools, exams are usually held, at least for four-term schools, they're usually held in the month of June. So we've got about 4 or 5 weeks, give or take a few days, for us to get ready for our exams. And this is going to be your first set of exams for high school, which is probably going to feel a little bit daunting. But guys, it really does depend on how much you decide to um, prepare for these exams. All right. There is going to be a lot to do, and we've still got a lot to discuss before we get to that exam season. But because we've only got about 5 weeks until such time as you guys write exams, we want to eventually get into all of our exam prep. So we've still got quite a bit of work to cover, but we will get to making sure that you guys know everything that you need to for your exams in the coming weeks. Okay. Grade Grade eights, we've been discussing quite a variety of topics so far this year, right? When we left off 2 weeks ago, we were talking about how we go about solving different kinds of equations. And we discussed what the concept of additive and multiplicative inverses is, but also what it does for us, right? How it helps us to solve different equations. Now, just very quickly, I want to touch on something. There were quite a few students that asked about why there was no tutoring last week, Monday. And I just wanted to quickly clear that up with you guys. So I generally do continue tutoring even on public holidays. Today is obviously a public holiday being observed. So we still have class today. We did not have class last week only because it was Easter Sunday or Easter Monday, right, being observed. So that is quite an important public holiday for a lot of people, which is why we decided we wouldn't have our lessons last week, Monday. But as far as the remaining public holidays are concerned for the academic year, there shouldn't be too many more instances in which we don't have a lesson. Okay. Now, as far as today's session is concerned, we want to again change to a slightly different topic. It's not necessarily completely different from what we had been discussing in the world of algebraic equations, but today we want to um, discuss what the world of pet mass has to do with everything that we learn about now at this level, right? As we move into exam season, I think it's very important that I discuss with you guys ways that we can approach questions that we have to answer. And because I cannot go through absolutely everything with you, I find that it's quite important that we get around to discussing how we approach questions. So, one of the things that a lot of students get confused with is not what the question is asking, but how you need to go about solving a question, because it's no surprise that the order in which we do things is very important. So, in today's lesson, grade 8, I want us to discuss the world of pet mass or bod mass, bed mass, whatever you know it as. But we're going to apply it in a little bit more detail today, looking at not only our very basic um, algebraic equations, but also questions where we don't have any variables in our questions, right? Where we're just working with simple numbers, because those can still throw a lot of people off. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen with you guys. If you guys could please do me a favor and type your names into the comment box for me, I would really appreciate it. It just lets me know who's joining us today so that I can keep track of the people that join more frequently. Now, Guys, in today's session, like I said, we're going to talk about PEDMAS, BODMAS, or PEDMAS, and the official term for that section of work is your order of operations. Now, we've spent time discussing what exponents are, for example, working through quite a lot of that, understanding how we add and subtract positive and negative numbers, how we multiply and divide positive and negative numbers, right, which we call integers. And all of that has been um, fundamental to us getting to this point where we can discuss how we solve questions that contain more than just one kind of calculation, right? So we know that we might have decimals and fractions and exponents and variables from algebra all contained in the same question. And when it comes to us wanting to solve these questions, sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating because we don't know where we're supposed to start. So that's what I want us to talk about today, because this is going to apply, like I said, not only to your algebra, but also to other sections of work that we have to do. Now, just very quickly, guys, there are a few different acronyms that different schools or different teachers will use, with PEDMAS, BEDMAS, and BODMAS being the most commonly used acronyms. Now, for the sake of today's lesson, we're going to use PEDMAS, but all of them tend to mean the same thing. It's just that they sometimes use different words. So, for example, we have the letter P over here in PEDMAS, but B in BEDMAS and BODMAS. And in the context of this section of work, P stands for parentheses, right, which means brackets, while B stands for brackets. So they mean the same thing, even though they have different letters to represent them. But like I said, we are going to focus on PEDMAS for today's lesson. Okay. So what I'm going to quickly do is break down PEDMAS so that we know what it really stands for, and then we're going to dive into examples like we usually would. Um, so let's start with that. You guys can write down today's date, which is the 28th of April, and then write down today's heading, which is going to be order of operations. And we'll start by quickly breaking down PEDMAS. Okay, a lot of you will know this. Remember, if you guys have any questions, you are more welcome to ask, but I'm going to dive straight into today's work. And when you guys have questions, you know that you just have to type them into the comment box and I'll respond as soon as I see them. So P stands for parentheses, which essentially just means brackets, guys. Whenever we are working with different questions, you'll see that sometimes your teacher will start to the far right hand side or even somewhere in the middle of a question. And that's normally because there are brackets involved in calculations. As we've been through different topics now, you guys have even seen how I've used brackets to sort of signify the order in which we need to do things. Okay, we always begin with brackets. Following this, we have E, which represents our exponents. Okay, exponents or powers. So whenever we see these, this is going to be our second sort of focal point. Then it's no surprise, we all learned this in primary school. D represents division, M for multiplication, and A for addition. Okay, those are the four major operations, and that's exactly why I've placed so much emphasis on us understanding how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide any number format that we are working with, whether it's fractions, um, different exponents, even variables, right? They all have the ability to be added, subtracted, multiplied, and divide. But sometimes there are just some different steps that we need to follow for each of them. So, for those of you that don't know, PEDMAS is written in a specific order because it shows us a ranking of importance when it comes to different operations. Now, when we um, focused on our equations, algebraic equations 2 weeks ago, we noticed that sometimes we have to add and subtract and then we multiply and divide, right? It's generally the case that we want to do these first and then we worry about multiplication and division in equations. And a lot of students will tend to ask why it's slightly different when we are working with equations as opposed to other sections of work. And guys, it's usually got to do with the fact that adding and subtracting allows us to collect like and or deal with like terms, right? Before we need to deal with multiplication and division to get to our final answer and isolate the variable. Now, it's not to say that adding and subtracting is more important than multiplying and dividing in equations. It's just the order that we do things in because it makes things just so much easier. But when we are looking at different questions, we need to approach them in a specific fashion so that we can solve them, we follow the rule of PEDMAS. We always solve from left to right. And then when we're looking at different kinds of expressions or equations that don't have brackets or don't have exponents, right? We need to find a way to order and structure our solving. And that's where PEDMAS comes in to play. So this is the order of importance as we move from left to right. So whenever we come across a question that has brackets and subtraction, it's way more important for us to expand or solve what we find in the brackets before we go ahead and deal with subtracting. Okay, so this is something that's really important to just keep in mind. And I'm not going to spend time explaining too many of the gears that sort of function behind the scenes. Instead, it makes sense for us to apply PEDMAS to examples because you're not going to be tested on why PEDMAS is the way it is, but rather you're going to be tested on questions that require you to use PEDMAS. Okay, so if we take a look at some examples, I'm going to start with some very basic ones and we'll gradually get more and more complex. Let's say we have 10 minus negative 4 plus 16 times 2. Okay. Looking at something like this, guys, this isn't complicated. But when we covered the topic of integers, right? Um, I pointed out to you guys that we use brackets to help us separate the addition and subtraction signs as well as positive and negative signs. So when I look at a question like this and I'm thinking about PEDMAS, when I see brackets surrounding a number, right? In this case, we have the number negative 4 surrounded in brackets. We are not being asked to do anything in or to these brackets, right? It's not the case that our brackets are being squared or that we have something happening inside the brackets. These brackets are simply here to help us order our work so that we don't have symbols like these, like the minus and the negative sign next to one another. Okay. So in this context, it's important for you to understand that the brackets are not parentheses because there's nothing for us to solve. This set of brackets is for a writing style, not to indicate to us that something is more important to be solved than something else. So if we quickly write out PEDMAS, let's identify what functions we need to take care of. There are no brackets in this example. Remember, these brackets are only to help separate work. They are not there to show us that something needs to be solved first. So we don't have brackets, we don't have exponents, and we don't have division. We do have multiplication, addition, and subtraction. So because this example has been given to us without much instruction as to where we need to begin, we need to apply PEDMAS, with multiplication being the first step. So we're going to keep 10 minus negative 4 as is, and we leave the plus sign. But we need to deal with the multiplication over here, which is joining the 16 and the 2. So 16 times 2 will give us 32, and that is the first step of multiplication done, even though we are starting on the far right-hand side of our equation. Next, we need to deal with our addition. So again, we will leave the 10 minus negative 4, well, the 10 minus in this case, but we need to now deal with the addition. The addition is joining the negative 4 and the positive 32. So if you have your calculator, you can take it out if you'd like, but negative 4 plus 32 gives us positive 28. Okay. And again, I could write the number 28 like this. That's completely fine. Or you can choose to write it in brackets. Okay. Again, not because something needs to be done to the number 28, but because there's a negative sign on the outside over here. So it's more a separator than an indicator of function. That leaves us now with simply needing to deal with our subtraction. 10 minus 28 is going to give us negative 18. Okay, and that's going to be the final answer for question number 1. So all I'm trying to point out to you here is you need to make sure that you understand where you are starting each example that you are working on. Okay. Right. Guys, if you have questions, please make sure that you ask. I am keeping my eye on the comment boxes. So that's our first example of using PEDMAS. Let's go ahead and use a second example. Let's say we had negative 5 squared plus negative 4 times 5, and we then need to divide by 2. Again, let's start with PEDMAS. In this sort of example over here, guys, do we have an example of brackets? Yes, we do. Right at the front over here, we have negative 5 squared, but that's not the bracket that we're interested in, sorry, when it comes to PEDMAS. Over here, we have a set of brackets that clearly shows that this needs to be solved before we can move on to doing anything else. Okay. Now you can do other parts independently, but I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So, do we have brackets or parentheses? Yes. Do we have exponents? Yes, because we have negative 5 being squared. We also have division. But now the question becomes, do we have multiplication in this example? Right? And the answer would be technically yes, we do within these brackets. But the brackets are what we consider to be most important to us. So, no, we technically do not have any multiplication to do because that function is completed when we solve the brackets. Lastly, we only have addition. So, taking a look at this example over here, we need to theoretically start with our brackets. Now, negative 5 squared can be left as is, and in our brackets, negative 4 times 5 is an example of multiplying integers. A negative number times a positive number gives us a negative result, and 4 times 5 is 20. So we now have negative 20. And in this case, you must leave this answer in brackets. Why? Because there are two signs that will be conflicting. Okay, so again, the brackets don't represent the fact that something needs to be done to this negative 20, but it acts as a separator between the positive and the negative. Finally, we also need to divide by 2. Right, so next we need to deal with the exponents because we've just dealt with the parentheses. Negative 5 squared is the same as saying negative 5 times negative 5. Two negative values, sorry guys, two negatives give us a positive result, and 5 times 5 gives us 25. So we have a simple positive 25 up front, plus this negative 20 that now needs to be divided by 2. Now, normally, we would go ahead and solve what we see here on the left-hand side. But in this case, we can see that there is an example of division. And according to PEDMAS, this needs to be solved first. So, in this case, what do we need to do? Negative 20 divided by 2 is a negative value being divided by a positive value, right? Negative divided by a positive will give us a negative result, and 20 over 2 will give us the answer of 10. So what we have is 25 plus, and again, we use brackets to separate the plus and the negative side. 25 plus negative 10 is going to give us 25 minus 10. And so we can simply write our final answer as positive 15. Now, this is why it's so important to follow PEDMAS, guys, because again, a lot of students will have a tendency to instead go ahead and use the idea that we solve from left to right in maths as an excuse to ignore PEDMAS. So in this step over here, 25 plus negative 20 divided by 2, a lot of students would take the 25 minus 20 to give me an answer of positive 5, and then divide this answer of 2 to give us an answer of 5 over 2, which is the same as 2.5. You can clearly see in this case that 2.5 and 15 are completely different values. So the order in which we solve things really does matter because it's going to have a big impact on the answer that you get in the end. Now, what I want to do is a third example that's not that different from example number 2. Okay, this is the third example. I'll try and leave some of question number 2 on the screen so that you guys can copy if need be. I haven't seen any questions yet, so I'm going to assume that everyone is okay for now. Sorry, guys, I see that some of the questions didn't load, so I just want to answer them quickly. Which subjects are we doing? Guys, for those of you that are new, when we do these tutoring sessions, they are only for maths, okay? We don't have sessions like this for any other subjects at the moment. If you guys do want lessons like this for the other subjects, please just type a message to me about that in the comment box. Somebody says that they knew and they wanted to find out if I give you guys work or just examples. In this case, guys, I am giving you examples now at the beginning, but I will give you guys some work to try on your own shortly. Okay. I just want to explain all of the basics first, but I will give you some questions to try. And on top of that, at the end of the lesson, I usually go onto iRainbow and show you guys examples of different quizzes that you can use. Okay, there won't be a quiz this week, but we will tackle one in next week's lesson. Okay, I hope that answers your question. If you do have more, please ask. So, looking at question number 3, guys, again, let's quickly go ahead and talk about headmass. Do we have brackets in which we need to solve things? Yes, we do. As a matter of fact, there's 2 sets of brackets, right? We've got the brackets up front over here, and this larger set of brackets on the outside of the second part. So yes, we've got brackets to deal with. Do we have examples of exponents? Technically, yes, but that's found within our brackets. Okay, so whether or not you want to say we have exponents to work on is up to you. I'm going to say that we don't for this example. Do we have division? Yes, technically we do, but again, it's within a larger set of brackets. Multiplication? Yes, but within brackets. And there's no addition or subtraction, but there is one example of division that we see over here in the middle, which we will attend to once we've solved both sets of brackets. Someone's asked if we have lessons every day or once a week. Guys, for now, it's only once a week. Um, I don't see that changing anytime soon. I do have lessons for other grades as well, so I teach many lessons a week, but there is only one lesson per grade per week. So let's go ahead and solve these brackets, guys. We'll start on the left over here. 6 times 4 is a simple 24, so there's not too much to worry about over there. But in the right-hand set of brackets, we have a little bit more work to do. At first, we're going to have to keep the outer set of brackets and deal with negative 2 cubed. Now, negative 2 cubed means that we're multiplying negative 2 by itself 3 times over, and a negative times a negative times a negative will give us a negative answer, while 2 cubed gives us 8. So within these brackets, we have negative 8 divided by negative 2. You can choose to enclose the negative 8 in brackets if you'd like, but we still have this larger set of brackets around this because we need to solve everything inside of here before we can deal with the division sign on the outside. So 24 divided by negative 8 divided by negative 2. We know that the negatives will cancel, or you can think of it as a negative divided by a negative gives us a positive answer, and 8 divided by 2 gives us 4. So all of this work that we see inside of the brackets simplifies to the value 4, and there's no need to keep brackets around that because it's not a negative value. And 24 divided by 4 gives us a simple answer of 6. Okay, I hope that makes sense to you guys. I'm going to give you an example to try on your own. Right. There is example number 4, and I'd like you guys to try this one on your own. Again, go ahead and use PEDMAS if you guys are getting a little bit confused. But I will give you a hint. When we work with fractions grade 8, things change a little bit because we need to understand that we can treat the numerators and the denominators independently, meaning that even though we might have exponents in a fraction and outside of a fraction, we can treat them as two separate examples and deal with them at the same time, even though they're in two separate locations. So go ahead and try example number 4. I'll give you guys 2 minutes to get your answer. You are not allowed to use your calculator. When you guys have an answer, please type it into the comment box for me so that I can see what answers you guys are getting. This makes use of your guys' understanding of positive and negative values, as well as your understanding of exponents. You guys have got 1 minute left, and then I'm going to go through the answer on the screen. All right, let's go through this step by step, guys. When we look at fractions, like I said, we can deal with pieces independently. We don't necessarily have to conform to using PEDMAS in a wider example like this. We use it when we run into a situation where there are multiple functions next to one another and there's no obvious order of priority. So negative 4 squared is the same as negative 4 times negative 4, which gives us positive 16. And 2 cubed in the denominator gives us 8. On the right-hand side, 4 times 2 in the numerator is 8. But what in the world is going on here? 2 to the power of negative 2. Remember, when I have a negative exponent, guys, it means that I need to move something to the bottom of a fraction. So I can turn this into 1 over 2 squared to make the exponent positive. 1 over 2 squared is a quarter. Okay. So when we try and solve this now, on the left-hand side, 16 over 8 gives us 2. And on the right-hand side, 8 divided by a quarter is asking you how many times can a quarter fit into 8. And it fits in 32 times. Remember, these fractions are examples of division, and division needs to happen before we can move on to multiplication, which we see in between the two fractions. 2 times 32 gives us a very simple answer of positive 64. I hope that that makes sense, guys. Now, like I was saying earlier, we can also run into situations where we need to deal with uh, order of operations, but in the context of algebra, right? And that's what I want us to take a look at next. I hope you guys see how I got to this answer. If you have questions, let me know. Let's move on to another. Let's say this time we included variables. Question number 5. Okay, x squared. I'll do this one with you guys and then give you one to try on your own. X squared plus x plus 2x squared, all divided by 2x squared. To a lot of people, this is going to look quite confusing and honestly daunting, but we need to consider PEDMAS again in this sort of situation. Why do I need to consider PEDMAS? Because I have all kinds of things going on within my fraction over here, and I'd rather make sure that I do things in the correct order. All right, so let's begin by identifying what we need to deal with. We clearly have brackets over here, but more importantly, exponents, right? So we need to deal with exponents first, but we are allowed to solve what we see inside of the brackets first. So depending on how you want to look at this, there are brackets and exponents. Do we have division? Yes, we do. But in this case, because we are working with fractions again, guys, we are allowed to complete everything we see at the top first and everything we see at the bottom first before we try and cancel things or simplify a fraction. Okay. So please remember that to some degree, fractions are an exemption to PEDMAS in a weird way. Looking at this fraction over here, the x squared in the numerator is not so important to us because it's only dealing with addition. We see that there are brackets over here, which we would much rather solve first. So we leave the x squared plus as is. Inside of the brackets, x plus 2x gives us 3x, right? That's solving the brackets, but we still need to deal with the exponent. So we can write that down as a step of its own. In the second step, again, we're going to leave the x squared that we see up front in the numerator alone. And we now deal with the exponents aspect. 3x squared. Let's think about this, guys. 3x squared is the same as 3x times 3x, or we can see this as distributing the power to the 3 and to the x. You can look at it either way, right? In the first example, 3 times 3 would give us 9. and x times x gives us x squared. In the second example, 3 squared is 9 and x squared is x squared. Either way, you're going to get the same answer. So we have x squared plus 9x squared, all of this to be divided by 2x squared. So now we can add what we have in the numerator to give us 10x squared, and we have 2x squared in the denominator. At this point, we are allowed to cancel. Right. The x squareds themselves are able to cancel because everything is being multiplied in the numerator and in the denominator. And 10 divided by 2 gives us a simple answer of 5. All right. Right, grade 8s, you guys are more than welcome to go and try number 6 on your own. Please make sure that you don't use a calculator when you try and solve these examples, guys. You've got 2 minutes to quickly find your answer, and then I'm going to show you the solution on the screen. All right, I'll go back up to number 5 now. Please try number 6 on your own. Guys, I just want to clarify something very quickly. When we have these sessions, I would love to obviously give you guys thousands of examples to try on your own and sit with you through all of them, right? That is not the function of these lessons. I will try and give you guys examples to attempt on your own, but the reason why we have these lessons is for me to try and teach you guys how to apply concepts. iRainbow itself, the platform, is where you will find all of the practice questions that you can use. What I generally tend to suggest, guys, is that when you need to practice, you need to write down notes and sort of understand what I'm trying to teach in the lesson by going through a few examples, and then go and apply this to your own examples that you can find in your text, right? Even solving or simplifying expressions is a great way for you to practice this. So at the end of this session, I'm still going to show you iRainbow and show you guys a quiz that you can practice. Some of you might have done it before, some of you might not have done it. Okay. But the function of these lessons is for me to give you all of the information that you might have missed in class or was not pointed out to you very clearly when you were going through it at school. Okay. I'm trying to help patch any misunderstandings that you guys have. But because we only meet once a week, I do not have the time to go through as many examples as I wish I could go through with you guys. All right. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. Um, Somebody's asked if X is known as number one. X can be any value, guys. X does not have a dedicated number. Remember, it's a variable. In this case, all we're trying to do is solve what we are working on. We are not trying to find a missing value. We're trying to work through all of the mess that we see and write this in the simplest form that we can. Okay. Right. If we take a look at example number 6, guys, how do we approach something like this? If we think about ped mass, what do we need to do first? We've got brackets, right? And exponents. So we can simplify what we see inside of these brackets first and then apply our exponents. Now, the issue is on either side, we have multiplication and division. The rule is that we need to divide first. So we must do division and then our multiplication. So we have four functions that we need to deal with independently. So let's start with the brackets. We leave the x squared as is times. In the brackets here, 2x divided by 4. What do we do with this? How do we simplify this? Well, we can write it slightly differently, 2x over 4, but that just allows us to simplify the coefficients or the constants. Okay, coefficients and constants. 2 divided by 4 is the same as a half. So this is the same as 1x over 2. And we can simplify this to either write it as x over 2, or you may write this as a half x. Okay. Again, guys, I'm trying to show you writing styles, how we write things out when we come into situations where we don't know how to simplify things. Keep in mind, all of you guys are coming from different schools and you've covered different topics. So the approach that I take is going to be different to your teacher in class. So we know now that this expression that we see in the middle of the brackets can be written as a half times x, right? I've chosen this writing style, but you can choose x over 2 if you wish to do so. This still needs to be squared. And then after this, we can divide by x to the power of 4. So let's go ahead. Now that we're done with the brackets, we can deal with the exponents. Inside of our brackets, we need to apply the square sign to the half and to the x. If we take a half and we square it, we get a quarter. How do I know that? Because of the exponential rules we discussed earlier this year, guys. Okay, there is how we get that answer. And x squared gives us x squared. This is where things start to get quite messy, and we need to be familiar with our exponential laws. The x squared in front stays as is. And what do we do now? Do we multiply or divide first, grade eights? We need to divide first. So we have to leave the x squared as is in front and deal with all of this. That doesn't look very nice. Okay. The easiest way to do this is now to write things in a fraction form, guys. So how do we simplify this? A quarter x squared divided by a quarter x to the power of 4. Okay. If we use our understanding of our exponential laws, x squared over x to the power of 4 means we're going to have a quarter left over at the top. And below that, we are going to have x squared. Now, this starts to look quite messy, and it's where your understanding of manipulation comes into play. Please remember, guys, there is more than one way to solve these questions. So if you're trying this on your own and you had a different answer, you are allowed to, sorry, if you had the same answer, you might still get the marks as long as you showed you're working out. How do we deal with this over here, grade eights? This mess. We can use our negative exponents. So we have x squared. And if we write this as a fraction, guys, x squared over 1, remember any value divided by 1 is still itself. So x squared and x squared over 1 are the same, times a quarter over x squared. When we do this, we find a way to cross cancel because we are multiplying. And finally, 1 times a quarter leaves us with a quarter as the final answer. So, guys, it's important to take note of the fact that if we were to change the order in which we did many of these calculations, it's possible that we would end up with different answers. And unfortunately, you might see a way that is easier than the correct way, right? You might want to do something first because it's easy as opposed to doing what is correct according to BODMAS. And unfortunately, guys, that leaves us in situations where we're already on the wrong path. So this is why we need to practice all of the fundamentals that we've been talking about over the past few weeks. We need to understand how we deal with fractions, how we deal with exponents, how we deal with integers, because all of these can be combined into questions like some of the ones that we've been through today. So the goal of today's lesson, guys, was to point out to you that you've got to be really careful with the way that you approach things. And I think one of the biggest takeaways should be your understanding of brackets. Okay. Just because I have brackets doesn't mean that there's something to solve. It's often used as a separator. So while you do need to understand how to times, how to divide, how to plus, how to minus, you need to understand when to do each of these things. And a lot of students get confused and they'll ask, how am I supposed to know that I was, meant to do step one first instead of step three? And that comes down to your understanding of head mass. So very quickly, guys, officially the lesson is done because I've been through all of the examples, but I did promise that I would show you iRainbow very quickly that you guys can use for practice. Again, I want to point out one last time, depending on the topic that we are going through, sometimes I will do more teaching. Sometimes I will ask you guys to try more examples. Okay. But these sessions are never going to be um, in a format where I give you examples and I sit and wait for you guys to give me answers over and over again. Okay. The goal is for me to come here and teach you stuff um, that you can go and apply to your work, because I do not see you often enough to sit with you for an hour in which you guys just try examples. Okay. I hope that that makes sense, guys. Even for the grade 10, the grade 10s, 11s, and 12s, we only do Q&A sessions, meaning that when we meet each week, the students come to me with questions and I help explain to them what might be wrong about their understanding so that they can go and apply it to their own work. All right. As you move further into high school, you guys are going to see that you've got to spend a lot more time doing things on your own. And I don't want to make you sit here for an hour and do things that you could do on your own in your spare time. I want to spend the time teaching you things that you might not be able to learn in any other setting. Okay, that's the goal. All right, so guys, I'm going to quickly change my screens. If you need me to come back to this so that you can finish copying, please let me know. I'll gladly do so, but I want to quickly show you guys iRainbow. For those of you that know it, you don't necessarily have to stick around, but I do want to show you guys a quiz that you guys can attempt. Okay. So when you guys open your iRainbow, it should look pretty much the same as mine. Okay. And given what we've discussed today, guys, orders of operations can apply to a few different topics, but given that algebra is quite a new section to you guys, I would strongly recommend you go and practice some of the quizzes under algebra. So when you open iRainbow, go ahead and click on the very first chapter, patterns, functions, and algebra. You can then click on algebraic expressions over here on the left. And over here, you'll find a few different quizzes that you guys can try that test your understanding of multiplication on its own, division on its own, squaring and cubing, or any form of exponent work on its own. Okay, go and master each of these independent exercises so that when you're put in a situation like the examples we've done today, you know how to apply them individually, and you can keep in mind that all you need to really do is pay attention to BODMAS or to the layout of your fractions. Okay, so I would strongly recommend you guys go and do these. For those of you that are new, please remember, or I just want to point out to you, sorry, if we're looking at exponents, for example, squares, cubes, square roots, cube roots, when you click on this topic, you're going to be greeted by a PDF that helps to explain a lot of important information and also gives you examples that you can try on your own. This is the first time or first instance in which you are greeted with examples that you can try on your own. After that, there is a video on that specific topic that will help to explain these independent topics in detail. Once you've been through all of this, guys, you then have access to the quiz where you can go and try questions on your own and get the correct answer, hopefully. And as you submit your answers and you make your way through the quiz, when you are done, you will see that you have a section on the left over here called reports, where you can go and assess your own understanding of the different topics that you've attempted a quiz for. Okay, so if I want to try, for example, graphs over here, if I do the quizzes within the graphs section, I'll get a very good understanding of which sections I have a stronger understanding in and which sections I might be able to improve in or I might need more practice with. Okay, so uh, what I generally recommend, guys, is as I go through a specific topic, you guys go ahead and try the related quiz. Now, today wasn't um, taught with a specific quiz in mind, right? It was trying to show you how you can approach different questions in a variety of different topics. But next week, we are going to move on to a different topic. It might be geometry, or it might even be a little bit about measurements. I'll let you guys know soon enough. But I hope that you guys will join for these sessions so that I can explain a lot of the fundamentals that you might not know. And then you have both your textbook, the questions in these PDFs, and the video platform that you can use to help you improve your understanding. Okay. Beyond that, guys, there are many textbooks that you can buy that will help you or just give you access to more questions that you can try. Okay. So you've got a lot of different resources available to you guys. And if you guys have questions about what textbooks to use or where to find past papers, right? If you want to try go through exams that have been written previously for practice for your upcoming exams, ask me about these things, guys. I have resources that I'm happy to share with you. Okay. But please just keep in mind that our lessons are for me to help patch your understanding and give you extra information rather than me tutoring each of you independently and giving you examples. Okay. So, guys, that's going to be it for today. I know we're a few minutes over. I do apologize for that. But please remember that the recordings, for those of you that are new, there are recordings of all of the sessions that we complete. And the recordings are all available on either the Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. Okay. You can access it from either platform and you can go and watch the recordings for free. So maybe if you are new, you want to go back and watch lessons on exponents or on certain sequences, you can go and do that. All right. But guys, that's going to be it for today's lesson. Our next lesson is going to be next week, Monday, again from half past five, sorry, to half past 6 in the evening. We'll be tackling a completely different topic. That was the last that I wanted to focus on for today, for the section of algebra for the most part. So we will be doing new work. I hope that you guys will join for that. If you think of any questions during the week, or you end up having more questions about how the tutoring works or how the platform iRainbow works, please feel free, guys, to bring your questions to the next session, and then I'll answer them as soon as we meet. All right. Guys, thank you so much. I hope you have a fantastic week ahead of you. I hope to see you all next week, but uh, enjoy the rest of your evenings, and we will chat then. All right. Thank you so much, grade 8s.